All right, that should be better. Let's check the. We're having to do some technical checks here, guys. I'm just running all this on my own. It's streaming to multiple platforms. We're checking how the Restream renames the channels here. Okay, so yeah, I'm live now. I'm back. Alexander Napolitan, attorney at large. This is my 10:30 session. It's like my third day of doing it. I'm going live every day at 10:30 and 4 o'clock, discussing current events from the legal perspective, taking your questions in the chat. Remember that anything we discuss on this channel is general in nature only. If you ask me questions in the chat, just so you know, it's not legal advice. If you need legal advice, you can only get that by sharing all of the facts and circumstances of your issue with a lawyer and then getting that feedback. If you're in California, I'm a California attorney. You can give my office a call, 866-NAPOLIN. If you're in another state, you can still give my office a call for help. We can maybe direct you to the right place. So today, current events. Before I had some errors with my mic. I also had some errors naming my stream here, and I'm streaming on Twitch. I'm streaming on YouTube. I'm streaming on Facebook. So today's story, and I have it up here, is the situation with the former Houston nurse who's accused in a deadly California crash. She had a history of mental illness. Now, I was asked yesterday in the chat by Sean, hey, what's the situation with this? Is there a defense to this case? Does this lady have a defense? Well, I'm a civil attorney. I'm not a criminal lawyer. This is a criminal case that's going on. So disclaimer, I'm talking about this case more from the civil perspective in California. And the question was, is there a defense? Well, Nicole Linton had a lot of issues going on. It looks like she had a history of mental illness, and that's outlined in the court documents that her lawyers submitted recently, that basically lay out the history of her issues and that she ultimately lost consciousness while driving due to a bipolar episode. That was specifically mentioned in this article that I found right here. Court documents from Linton's defense detail her 4-year struggle with bipolar disorder, and records from UCLA Medical Center say that Linton underwent a loss of consciousness triggered by bipolar disorder and possibly other mental and neurological conditions. So that's the UCLA Medical Center. Those are the records that were submitted by Linton's lawyers, Nicole Linton's lawyers, to the court saying, hey, there was a loss of consciousness, and therefore I believe this is related to some other procedure, maybe for bail and other things, to just kind of argue that she should be let out, or that she should have bail, that she'd wear an ankle bracelet, that she should be in a place, not in a jail, but in some place to take care of her. So that is kind of the context of these proceedings. So that's what's been submitted to the court. Now, from a liability context, I'm an accident injury attorney. So I do auto accidents from the civil perspective, not from the criminal perspective. So what's going on here is that Nicole Linton is being detained by the government. The government believes that she's committed a crime. They want to hold her for trial. And her defense attorneys are arguing that she should have bail, that she's not a flight risk, that she's really just needing health services. So that's the context of the case. And I think the question in the chat yesterday was towards the defense. Is it a defense? Well, let's say that the people who are, and this is a very sad story because she killed 6 people. We can go over that again. I went over it earlier, but 6 people were killed in the crash, included a 23-year-old pregnant woman, her boyfriend, her unborn child, and her 11-month-old son in one car. Okay, 2 other women were also killed in the crash. 6 other children and another adult suffered minor injuries. So all of those people, the family members of the people who passed away, Sorry, I was checking my phone there. All of the people who sustained minor injuries, they might say, "Hey, Houston nurse Nicole Linton, we don't care what happens with the criminal matter. We just want your insurance policy, and we want you to pay us civil damages." This happens, you see, like with O.J. Simpson, there was also a civil trial. With Michael Jackson, there was also a civil trial. So there's always this civil trial that kind of happens afterwards, maybe, and there's additional liability to pay money to the claimants, to the victims. and it's not about the incarceration of the perpetrator. So separate and aside from the criminal allegations, there can be civil allegations by private parties, and those would be the 6 people who were killed in the crash. Their family members would have potential wrongful death cases against Nicole Linton and her estate and her insurance policy if she has one. Although people who drive irresponsibly, who are out on the road with bipolar disorder, who have major issues, psychiatric issues, they might not have insurance. They might not have means to pay, which happens a lot, unfortunately. It happens quite a bit. So some investigation needs to be done. Now, the insurance carrier for the defendant, okay, for Nicole Linton, might argue, and this has been put forward in some of my cases, what I've already written about and blogged about here on my website, California automobile accident sudden emergency excuse. Now, this is an excuse that also can apply to physical and mental disabilities if they're unknown prior to the incident. So, for example, the best way to describe the sudden emergency is that there's a sudden emergency that, let's say you're driving down the road and suddenly somebody just runs the red light right in front of you, and you have to veer out of the way. And while veering out of the way to miss them, you hit someone else. Now, you had a sudden emergency. All of a sudden, something came up, and you had no control over it, and that modifies how the judge instructs the jury. The judge will then instruct the jury to see it from the person having the emergency's perspective, and will tell the jury, you should understand that there was an emergency that was being avoided, and you should put yourself in the shoes of the defendant who caused the accident, okay, who hit you. They were just trying to swerve to avoid someone who ran a red light, and they had no choice. So a reasonable person wouldn't have done anything else, and that makes the person, that's ultimately along the lines of the reasoning that, hey, you'll find maybe 0% negligence on behalf of this person who avoided hitting the person who ran the red light that ultimately hit someone else. I don't know if that makes sense, but we're discussing here in the hypothetical where someone is driving down the road and someone runs a red light, and the person who's driving down the road tries to avoid the person running the red light and hits someone else while trying to avoid collisions completely, doing something that, maybe under normal circumstances would not be prudent, but the defendant could ask the jury to find that it was a sudden emergency. Now, does the California automobile accident sudden emergency excuse potentially apply to Nicole Linton? And for a civil case, this is not the criminal matter. I'm discussing potential civil liability. That's what I do. I'm a California attorney. I do personal injury, automobile accidents, workers' compensation, injury law in general, litigation against insurance carriers. My name's Alexander Napolin, attorney at large. I'm going live every day between at 10:30 and at 4. And you can come into the chat. You can ask me questions. I guess I should actually check my chat to see if there's any questions. No, there are not. Now, this is an issue that I've had, is that I'm streaming on multiple platforms, and I'm not really sure how we're going to combine all those. But combining the chat on a screen. But let's get back on topic here. So, automobile accident sudden emergency excuse, does it apply to Nicole Linton, who had a loss of consciousness suddenly? So there's a narrow exception in California, and I can pull up the case law on it. I've done the research on this particular point that basically says, hey, if somebody has a mental, like a physical stroke, and they had no idea at all that they were going to ever have this stroke, or they have a heart attack, or they have some type of brain aneurysm, and they were perfectly 100% healthy prior to the incident, it's arguable that that's a sudden emergency, that the emergency is the loss of consciousness. The emergency is the inability to control your body for that moment, something that's completely related only to the defendant, only to the person who caused the accident. Okay, California recognizes that person could be protected by the automobile accident sudden emergency. doctrine defense. And it's a defense. So the plaintiff must prove negligence, but the defendant can say, no, despite the fact that I was negligent, you should consider the sudden emergency. So the sudden emergency defense put forward by the defendant, could be put forward by Nicole Linton's insurance company, is that she had a loss of consciousness and that a reasonable person would not have been able to maneuver their car out of the reckless behavior that she was engaged in. And it was almost like she lost consciousness. Now, that's what the medical records state. So this defense is already starting to potentially develop for her on the civil liability side of things. Now, there is a caveat there. There's something to be that she needs to be careful about, though, because if she knew that she had been having these issues, in other words, if at some point she had lost consciousness in the past, or she had bipolar episodes before, and had lost consciousness and knew that was a potential risk of while she was driving, then she would potentially lose the defense, because for the defense to work, it has to be an emergency. And if the person who lost consciousness knew that they could potentially lose consciousness, then that's not an emergency. That's something that could have been prevented. And a reasonable person would have maybe taken steps so that they didn't have the potential to lose consciousness while on the road. So the sudden emergency excuse will not work for the same reason potentially that Nicole Linton will get her bail and get into a mental facility for what happened, is because she has so many problems, because she already had so many issues. Arguing the sudden emergency, in my opinion, is going to be very difficult. So if you're out there, if you're a family member of one of these victims, if you had minor injuries, if you've been contacted by an insurance carrier for Nicole Linton, you might just dial 866-NAPOLEON. That's my number. You can reach me. My name is Attorney Alexander Napolin, attorney at large. I go live every weekday at 10:30 and 4 o'clock discussing current events from a legal perspective and also taking your questions in the chat. So you might have questions about current events. You might have questions about your own legal situation. If you have questions about your own legal situation, I'd be happy to address basic questions, give you some hypotheticals, help you understand your situation better. But remember, it's not legal advice. It's general in nature only. It's general information that's meant to help you. You can only get legal advice after discussing all of the facts and circumstances of your situation with a lawyer and then listening to that feedback. And even then, it's your decision on to pursue legal action or not. So you can get help from me because you have to gather general information about the world and make a structure about how you're going to pursue your situation. And I can help you do that. So every day, subscribe to my channel, follow me on Twitch, subscribe on YouTube, hit the notification bell so you can be aware that I'm live. You can ask me questions. You can tune in for a quick current event from the legal perspective. In this case, you might be interested about Nicole Linton and understanding the liabilities there. There's always a civil case, usually always a civil case with the criminal case. In this circumstance, it looks like the criminal case is at the bail stage in some sort of preliminary situation where the court is getting paperwork from the defendant, Nicole Linton's attorneys, about her medical conditions and her situation with her flight risk and danger to the public. Now, bail is the concept of bail and all that. That's a topic for another stream. But so in this situation, the morning's topic, Nicole Linton, the sudden emergency. We'll go back to that there, just as a little, we'll go back to this here, sudden emergency. Let me just do a little shifting here. I don't know how I'm going to want to do this. It's pretty good. Sudden emergency excuse. I also have this little screen reader. Turn that off. So, okay. So taking your questions in the chat now. We're done with our legal explanation, our current event from the legal perspective. That's Nicole Linton, mental illness, sudden emergency excuse. Probably not going to work because of all the prior situations she's had, but maybe she's never lost consciousness before. Maybe this is truly the first time that she's been unable to control her car. Now, there's prior incidents, prior auto accidents, prior situations. It's not going to look good for it being an emergency because it's a very narrow exception. I mean, the jury's going to have to truly believe that she had no clue that she could lose consciousness because this is a horrendous situation. 6 deaths, including young innocents. Okay, let's take a look at the chat. Let's see what we have. We can switch back over to here. Chat overlay. What do we got? Oh, I can copy this and I can put my Restream chat. Oh, that's really cool. So I can maybe do a chat overlay into OBS. Okay, so for the afternoon, I'm going to have a chat overlay on the screen so that if you're on YouTube, if you're on Twitch, if you're on Facebook, you're going to be able to just, ask a question and then everybody will see it no matter where you are. It'll probably be coming up here on the side. I'll be able to switch over, talk about the California automobile accident, sudden emergency excuse. Does it apply to Nicole Linton? Am I getting her name right? I've been saying her name. Yeah, Nicole Linton. She suffered a loss of consciousness from a bipolar episode, killing six. So that's this morning. We can discuss it more this afternoon. I know Sean might be back. We can have further discussion on where we're at in the legal proceedings there. But just so you know, if you are out there and you are listening and you're interested in hearing a current events each day from a legal perspective, important events that are important for you to know and understand. Also, I'm taking your questions in the chat. I'm a California attorney. Alexander Napolitan, attorney at large, goes live. Get information about the law on my channel. Anyway, I'll see you all back here at 4. I'll be going back live and I'll have my chat screen up. All right.